With the advancement of digital learning tools, podcasts have emerged as a valuable resource in English language teaching. They offer a rich, accessible, and engaging medium for students to enhance their language skills. During this report, we're going to explore the advantages of using podcasts in the classroom, effective techniques for their integration, and practical recommendations for English teachers. Podcasts are really easily accessible and can be listened to on the go, making it a convenient learning resource. And podcasts can be integrated into lessons in various ways, from supplementary materials to the primary content. Also, podcasts provide students with exposure to the natural conversational English, preparing them for real-world interactions. So let's start with the advantages of using podcasts in the English classroom. And the first advantage is that a podcast enhances listening skills. Podcasts expose students to authentic language use, diverse accents, and natural intonation, improving their listening comprehension. Podcasts help students practice distinguishing between formal and informal speech, idiomatic expressions, and colloquial phrases. The second advantage is increasing vocabulary and pronunciation. Listening to podcasts introduces students to new vocabulary in context, helping them understand meaning, usage, and pronunciation. Repetition of phrases in different contexts reinforces the learning of the new words. Also, podcasts can be accessed anytime and anywhere, allowing students to practice English outside the classroom. They cater to different learning paces and styles, giving students control over their listening activities like pausing, replaying, or speeding up the audio. Also, podcasts improve speaking and critical thinking skills. After listening, students can engage in discussions, debates, or summaries of podcast content, enhancing their speaking skills. Analyzing podcast topics help develop critical thinking, encouraging students to express opinions and relate the content to their own experience. The next advantage is engagement and motivation. The variety of topics, genres, and speakers available in podcasts can cater to students' interests, increasing their motivation to learn. The storytelling format of podcasts makes learning more engaging and enjoyable. Now I'm going to share some techniques for using podcasts during English lessons. During the pre-listening activities, as a prediction task, you may ask students to predict the podcast content based on the title, cover image, or short description. Also, you may introduce key vocabulary and phrases to help students understand the podcast better. Also, you may set a general listening task to capture their main idea of the podcast, which is going to be listening for gist. For while listening stage, you may use note-taking, where you need to encourage students to take notes on key points, new vocabulary, or interesting facts during the podcast. Also, you may use listening for specific information tasks, like assigning tasks where students have to listen for specific details such as names, dates, or reasons. Also, you may use gap fill exercises, where you provide transcripts with missing words or phrases for students to fill in as they listen. As for the post-listening activities, you may use discussion and reflection, where you should facilitate a group discussion on the podcast topic, asking students to share their thoughts and opinions. Also, you may use summarizing tasks, like where students summarize the podcast content in their own words, either orally or in writing. Also, you may use role-playing, where students recreate or role-play parts of the podcast to practice pronunciation and speaking fluency. And you may use follow-up research, where you should assign a research task related to podcast topic to deepen students' understanding and encourage independent learning. Also, there are some practical recommendations for teachers, like selecting appropriate podcasts. Choose podcasts that match your students' language proficiency levels. For beginners, opt for slower speech and simpler vocabulary. For advanced learners, select podcasts with more complex topics. Select podcasts that align with your lesson objectives and students' interests to maximize the engagement. Also, integrate podcasts into your curriculum. Incorporate podcasts as part of listening comprehension practice in regular lessons. Use podcasts as supplementary materials for homework or self-study assignments to encourage students to practice outside the class. Also, create a podcast club where students can listen to, review, and recommend podcasts to each other. Also, you may utilize podcast creation as a learning activity. Encourage students to create their own podcast as a project, which can help them practice speaking, scripting, and editing skills. Topics for student-created podcasts could include book reviews, interviews, discussions on current events, or sharing cultural stories. For this, you should design assignment rubrics that focus on listening comprehension, vocabulary usage, critical thinking, and speaking skills. Provide feedback on students' participation in discussions, the quality of their summaries, and their engagement with podcast content. Also, it is important to select appropriate podcast content for different proficiency levels. Here's the list of some popular podcasts for English learners that suggest some simple conversations with explanations of new words and phrases for beginners, and podcasts that offer in-depth articles and analysis on current events and topics for advanced learners. The use of podcasts in teaching English presents a valuable opportunity for enhancing language learning in an engaging, flexible, and authentic way. Firstly, podcasts improve listening skills and expose students to real-life language, helping them become familiar with various accents, intonations, and colloquial expressions. Secondly, they offer a versatile tool for language practice, as teachers can easily integrate podcasts into lessons for vocabulary building, pronunciation practice, and comprehension exercises, catering to students' different proficiency levels and learning styles. Lastly, podcasts can boost students' motivation and engagement by providing interesting, diverse content that aligns with their interests and real-world topics. By effectively incorporating podcasts into the curriculum and employing creative teaching techniques, educators can enhance their students' language skills and create a more dynamic and interactive learning environment.